Now that you've clicked on this video, I would ask you the question, do you wish to improve? Obviously, on the surface level, your answer is going to be yes. However, if you do not track the appropriate numbers and the appropriate metrics, you will never be able to improve because you'll never get an accurate measurement of where you currently are. That is exactly why in this video, I'm going to break down the exact Instagram DM tracker for both inbound and outbound DMs that I use to reverse engineer whatever revenue goals that I have. And it specifically goes over and uses all of the metrics from when someone first sees your face on social media all the way up until the point that they convert. And some of the softwares that I use to track this data consist of DM Tracker, ManyChat for the inbound DMs that are coming in from the comment automations and lead magnets. And then there's also Trackio, which I like to use for specifically the link in the Instagram bio. And then I've also heard great things about Mochi. And then you can also track this data by yourself completely manually, given that you're not doing some sort of mass outbound or inbound and don't have too much volume in the DMs that you would need a software to track it. Now, with that being said, let's get into these specific numbers and metrics. So first, DM volume. How many DMs are you sending out? For the sake of example, this is an old outbound. Let's say if you're sending out 50 DMs, out of the DMs that we send, how many are actually opened on Instagram? When somebody opens a message, there is a seen icon that they've opened it up. And then after that, we're tracking DM conversations. So how many of those opens actually responded and turned it into a fluid conversation? Now, it should be notable that I'm not tracking follow-ups here based on the initial leads that didn't actually respond to the whatever initial message that I sent out. I'm not tracking follow-ups because it's simply not substantial enough to impact my revenue. And that's why I completely separately track it, but I don't include it in this specific tracker. After that, we have qualified leads. So out of the conversations that we created, how many of them are actually qualified based on whatever financial criteria you would like to put them through, or based on whether or not you can service whatever offer somebody's running. And then after that, we have calls booked. Then we have calls showed. Once again, I don't include no show because there are hundreds of reasons why a lead can no show, which can literally be they might have a trust issue. Maybe it's that they had a rescheduling issue. Maybe it's that they're scared for some sort of reason. It's literally insert objection of the reason why they no showed. So if you see a huge drop off between the calls that you book and the calls that you showed, then you can decide and further investigate into the issue to decide what you're going to do about that and what is specifically causing the no shows. After that, we have calls closed, and then we have average selling price or average order value that you charge for whatever offer you have. And then after inputting these specific statistics into this tracker, everything else will be automatically calculated for you based on the overall revenue goal that you have. So now let's go over these percentage numbers. So this right here is the total revenue. Beyond that, we have these 5 main numbers that I look at, which are DMs to opens, opens to DM conversations, conversations to calls, calls to shows, calls booked to clients. And specifically, if you noticed and it stood out to you, right here, all of these statistics are tracking each step in the funnel, what the drop-off rate was, meaning where you lost your prospect throughout this entire process from when they first see your face on social media up until the close. So right here, we send out a DM. Did they actually open the message? That is what this percentage looks at. 86% DMs to opens. Now, the primary way to use this is by figuring out what the bottleneck is in your company that stops you from reaching whatever revenue goal you have. And instantly, while looking for the lowest numbers, the ones that stick out to me are a 16% opens to DM conversations. This tells us that our opener, whatever DM opener we're using, is horrendous, because if 43 people are opening or seeing our messages, there's no reason why only 7 of them should actually become conversations. That means we must change our opening message. Next, the calls booked to clients also sticks out to me because it is only 16%. And maybe if I closed another call out of these 6 calls that I booked, that would lead to an extra 2K in revenue, given that this is the price I'm charging. That is significant for this company. However, if you also look at the volume of total calls, we've only taken 3 calls or we've only booked 6 calls. So is that actually significant enough data to the point where we're going to want to fix this? Probably not. If I was in this situation, it is much, much easier for me to first, while prioritizing my time, fix my opener that I'm using, because that can be split tested or done very, very easily. And I can start to fix this number, and that would severely better whatever revenue we're making. It would help the company achieve their goals. Okay, then we have these two statistics right here, which absolutely and utterly nobody talks about, but they're so crucial. So we have new leads to calls booked, and then we have disqualification rate. Now these two statistics are so helpful in determining not only what specific type of content you should be posting, but also what is happening with your setters in your DMs. So for example, if your disqualification rate is too low, let's say for example you're aiming for 10%, then it means that you should, one, post more top of funnel content, not crazy top of funnel content to the point where you're just trying to purposefully increase your disqualification rate, but top of funnel content that broadens the total viewers that you're appealing to, so that you can get not only more views but also more sales until the system collapses. And then as a result of disqualification rate eventually becoming the new bottleneck of the company, you will have grown by then because you increase the total throughput that you're putting through the system in the first place, which will eventually and inevitably result in some sales. Then after that, we also have new leads to calls booked, which is very similar. For example, if it is low, it means that you should post more niche down bottom of funnel, middle of funnel content that would specifically educate and nurture your viewers. And then you should also understand what specifically is happening in your DMs that is stopping these people from converting into booked calls, because that is specifically a setter issue. Then we also, let's say for example, the disqualification rate is too high. Then you can also post more bottom of funnel niche down content. And let me give you an example of this. Let's say for example, you're running a agency coaching company that helps agencies that are above 20K a month scale up to 100K plus. And the issue that you're facing is a too high disqualification rate because too many people are not financially qualified. Then you should post more bottom of funnel content and middle of funnel educational content that helps people scale their agency up to 20K for those beginner agencies. And then you would see that there's more financially qualified leads coming in to buy your product, which would then solve the initial issue that you were facing that was leading to the high disqualification rate. Similarly, if your new leads to calls booked is high, that means you should post more top of funnel content until that KPI collapses. Typical for both of these statistics is 10% is the proper KPI that, given that you're doing enough outreaches, you will get a very solid result. Next, we move on to the second column, which is the reverse engineering column, as I like to call it. Let's say that we're going for 10K per month right here, which is the total revenue that we aim for. These are the only two variables in this entire column that you actually input for it to reverse engineer based off of, which is the total amount that you wish to earn, which is what we're tracking in the first place or trying to achieve with this entire tracker. So let's say we're trying to make 10K a month and we charge the same $2,000. That would mean, based on these metrics, that we would have to do 250 outreaches. That is very possible, and that is exactly why, based on if we change absolutely nothing in the business, keep in mind all of these percentages are the exact same. If we didn't solve any of these issues, what would the result be in terms of how many outreaches we would have to do to be able to achieve the result that we want? And the answer is you would have to do 250 based on these specific percentages that you are actually achieving right now. And this also tells us that, let's say for example, you wanted to, keeping all of these the same, achieve 1 million a month, right? That would mean that you need to do 25,000 outreaches. Now, this is not very sustainable. That is not very possible. And that is exactly why at this goal, given that you're keeping everything here the same, which is unrealistic, it might mean that you need to charge more. And that is another thing which this specific tracker helps you decipher. Maybe you need some one-off deals that would bump up your overall average order value that you're charging, and then it becomes a lot less hefty in terms of the manual effort that you need to take, because that 25,000 DMs instantly drops down to 10,000 once you start charging more. Right here, some of the other metrics that I like to track, which are very motivational for your setters, consist of revenue per DM. This just shows you exactly how much it is worth for every single one of the DMs that you or your setters goes into, and is highly motivational because you understand that there's a direct ROI correlated with however much volume you do. And so you're going to feel very nice putting in that next piece of effort, that next DM, that next cold call, maybe even that next piece of content, because you know you're going to get some inbounds from it. Then we also track revenue per video, and I also initially mentioned link click to booking rate when I mentioned the software Trackio. But with that being said, this exact tracker is linked down below in the description. Use it for yourself, fill these out. It does not take a long time to just fill out these like 10 numbers. It doesn't take a long time to fill them out, and it will have substantial impact on your company, and it will allow you to specifically reverse engineer the goals that you have based on what you've seen right here. And with that being said, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Instagram and I'll be more than happy to help you out. Good luck.